time to get started. We are here in the Nutmeg Tavern. We are live. It is Friday. Is it Friday already? Seems like this week, Monday was like yesterday, and now it's Friday. We're here in the Nutmeg Tavern. We're going to have fun. I'm your host, John Townsends, and we're going to be talking about 18th century stuff and modern day stuff. So when the topic today is library, and some of it is our library and some of it is their libraries. So we're a mix and match kind of topic today. But we're sticking with libraries because libraries are just uber fun and cool. I'm joined by Lauren, who's in the chat.
Hello, everybody.
And Ivy, who's on the console.
Hi, everyone.
So there we go. I got those guys helping me out there because if I did this by myself, I'd mess it all up and it would be terrible. It is, people have been chiming in, talking about the wonderful weather as they're chiming in from all over the place. And the weather here is perfect. You couldn't get a nicer day than 73 degrees and just bright
Light
and sunny.
breeze.
It's like, what is this? This is summer. This is August. This is incredible. For some of the people in the building today, their children going to school, first day today. Anyway, libraries. Wow, I love libraries. I've always loved libraries, and I grew up in a family where we had lots of books, and just like, you can't have enough books. That's all I can say. People, as I was growing up, people reading to me, I had books to enjoy, and book collections and libraries are an important part of my life. In fact, our house is like half of our house is books. So there's our library at home. There's the library down in the office, in the customer service office and we kind of have them where they're separated out. The reason why here, let me bring up that first picture. So this is one of the new libraries here in the building. So the books were stacking up so much in my room. Because all my bookshelves are full, that I'm like, okay,
you can barely walk through.
That's it. I can't. I'm tripping over these giant stacks of books. So I'm gonna start to restructure the libraries a little bit. So that library is actually close here to the Nutmeg Tavern, and it has books that are not cookbooks and are not material culture. So those kind of move those all in there. All the cookbooks end up in the library that's in my office. The material culture books for actual kind of the stuff of the 18th century. Since we do a lot of product research, that happens in customer service. And then, of course, there's my library at home, which I use for a lot of making videos. So there's just basically books scattered everywhere in my life. And I have a lot of fun with that. I thought we'd take just a real quick look at some of the library images that we have from the 18th century. And I wanted to mention a couple of different people that in history, let me write this one down. There we go. I'll touch on those people later on, but let's look at just a couple of images for the 18th century and libraries. And lending libraries were a thing that was started here in North America in the 18th century. And of course, you see them in Great Britain, and they become, some people have small libraries of their own, and then other people go and enjoy books at lending libraries. And here, this one is called the Lending Library. So people are getting books out and taking them home. And there were, novels in the 18th century. Some of these are, you can see right behind the person. There's romance, there are sermons, there are plays, there are, they have them kind of separated out. There's some of the categories, of course, are much narrower in the 18th century. They didn't have, all the technology kind of books that we would have today. But they've got, fun categories for everyone. If you look here at the very top of that image here, it says circulating library. again, kind of lending library things. It seems like some of the libraries are almost like bookstores. They call them libraries. I don't know if I'd want to have all my books there in the window. If it was my library, I'd get them all.
Hopefully they move them around because
Yeah.
they would get faded pretty quick.
Exactly. But maybe the artist just kind of put the books in the windows to have us know what it was, right? If
Yes,
it's a picture from
that's
the
true.
outside, it's like, well, now they did have, sometimes you'll see in stationery stores or stores that would sell not books, but just sheet music or cartoons, they would plaster them up on the windows just like this, and that could be what some of these are. Again, these libraries aren't necessarily public, they're private, and so they may sell some of their books. They may be half library, half bookseller. We've got, of course, learned men are always in the libraries. That's where their knowledge comes from in so many circumstances, and now they transmit that knowledge into different generations. We can see these people are kind of disputing or having different looks to their faces. Some people are studying the background. I thought the book ladder, we see these because, of course, just like me, you don't have enough room ever for your books, and up, if you got tall ceilings, you just keep moving them up. So you need ladders, and they have this nice little short step ladder, and it's got one kind of rung that stands up taller than the rest, so you can hold on to it while you're climbing up, or maybe steady yourself as you are up at the top while you're getting books down. You can see they don't even have enough room for their books. Some of them are on the floor over here. Oh, don't I know that so well. This one was called a library, but it could, it seems a bit more like a bookstore in this one, or even a stationery shop, because they seem to have some, like in the window, you see something that's hanging up that I believe it's a quill holder with multiple quills that's hanging up there. Again, they've got the same kind of windows and have books and advertisements in the front. There's a just published list on the background, so that maybe you're going to purchase a new book, or what's new in the library. A lot of dogs in these images. Apparently, I don't have any problem with dogs or cats in their library. Nice oil lamps so you can read at night. So that obviously we see some library like this would be open past when it was dark. A library in a home, you don't see as many, and obviously somebody who has a large library in their home, they are very well to do, because books are incredibly expensive in the time period. They have their cat and their dog there, the wife or whoever is reading on the one side, and the other person just crashed out there. I think this is a Rowlandson image, and you always has people crashing and burning on. So we got the dog inside the library, and obviously there was nothing to hold on to.
His ladder did not come equipped with a safety feature.
So, the OSHA's going to show up there. It's like, wow, that was no good. But lots of learned people with their mortar boards and everything. It's very studious if you're wearing a mortar board, which I'm not sure why anybody would do that. And this one's a little bit later, early 19th century library, a beautiful library, lots and lots of books. In fact, it's got a whole sort of mezzanine level so that you don't have to have the ladder. You got a stair step to go up to see the multiple books. Reading room where people can read, standing desks in the back. Wouldn't I love to go perusing through? That's what's kind of fun about some of these. It's like, imagine I was in that library and I would be able to go.
I'd love to visit.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we thought we would pull some of the fun books out of our library and talk about them. Now, some of these books are the ones that you might be able to find. And a lot of these are out of print books because everything seems to go out of print now, which makes me very unhappy. It's like, if you see a book that you really need, you should buy it. and not wait, because I mean, it may never be available again. And some books wonderfully are reprinted because they continue to be needed. But we've created a list on our Amazon affiliate store. There's a link to that, and there's some of the books that I'm going to mention here I put in the list for the library live stream, right? So
before we
Yes.
move into our books, and I did drop the link to
Oh,
the
thank
collection so for people, but before we move in, I do have some questions.
yes.
So, someone was wondering how many books on Nutmeg are in this library that we have.
None. I don't have any Nutmeg books.
Someone needs to write one that's
Well,
just...
there is the one book specifically on Nutmeg. The title isn't coming to me right now, but it's about the Nutmeg Islands in the South Pacific, or however you want to call that, and the kind of battle for that and bringing nutmeg, this whole nutmeg trade. So there is a book on that. I just can't remember the title of it.
Somebody was wondering if the books were organized by the Dewey Decimal System, or
Are you kidding?
or if we'd thought about doing that.
That takes a lot of work, and what I generally do is just have shelves that have that. I just make up my own categorizing system, and just kind of keep those in this shelf area and the others.
Close to my desk, I've got, look, this is the pottery shelf,
Right.
and this is the fabric shelf, and this is the clothing construction shelf. So if we find a book like that in the wrong place, we just kind of trot it back there and put
exactly.
it away.
So, there are back over there. There's a specific section for 3 or 4 shelves that are specifically for first-hand account and memoirs, and then a separate section for things like economic issues directly, and prisons and crime, and building materials and whatnot. So we just ad hoc categorize them without getting too crazy, because I mean, as big as our library is now and broken up where it is, we would have to hire somebody full time to do something crazy like that, and so we don't.
It'd be nice too having a librarian. It'd be great.
Yeah.
What kind of papers, what types of paper were there that these early books were printed on? Was it wood pulp based like we have today?
Yeah, no, all the books are going to be laid paper. They're probably all rag for the most part. When wood pulp comes in and becomes, it really kind of destroys books. So the books that I do have some period books. Come here, book. And there's more books over here. So, here's this book has, it's from 1733. This book is, there we go. This book is almost 300 years old. And it looks better than a book that you probably bought 10 years ago. It is laid paper. You don't see any of the weird brown oxidizing acid paper problems. It is in superior shape, excellent shape for a book like this. Original binding is still there enough.
And it would probably be in better shape if someone didn't throw it around and drop it.
Yeah, whatever. I didn't drop it.
No.
You almost dropped it.
Well, I didn't. But laid paper, you can see very closely, it has little like screen lines in it, and they hold. It's like if only books were printed this nicely today. But it's one of the reasons why the books were expensive in the time period. Now they did have the equivalent of paperback books or even pamphlets that are just sewn together books. They're just little thin things. But yeah, that was that.
Okay.
That's me answering a question. Now, where's the end of that?
Wait, now where were we?
Yeah.
So how did they finance libraries back then, and were there any free charitable ones?
So I'll go ahead and read this section for you. I don't know when the idea of the free library comes up, but this is from Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, And above here on the page, he's talking about September 1st, 1730. So sometime in the early 1730s in Philadelphia. So it's, it's early in the 18th century. He talks about his little group of friends getting together, and they have a sort of a disputing society, and they get together and argue or talk about different philosophy and whatnot. But he comes up with the idea that they bring all their books together as a group, and then that sort of that's interesting, but they didn't really have enough books, and they weren't being taken care of well enough, and so everybody takes their books home after a while. But he says, and now I set on foot my first project of a public nature, that for a subscription library. I drew up the proposals, got them put into a form by our great scrivener, Brockton, and by the help of my friends in the junta, procured 50 subscribers of 40 shillings each to begin with, and 10 shillings a year for 50 years, a term our company was to continue. We afterwards obtained a charter, the company being increased to 100. This was the mother of all North American subscription libraries, now so numerous. So that's what they did to fund their library in the first place. You'll see this subscription idea coming up with regular books, other situations. It's a lot like crowdfunding. It's a lot like crowdfunding in the 18th century. You get together a certain number of people for a project, they all chip in a certain amount, and then you have enough money to make the project happen. And that's exactly what he does here with a subscription library. Okay, pay in a certain amount up front, 40 shillings. That way we have enough money to buy a certain amount of stock, and then there's a certain amount each year that you would pay in so that we can purchase new books and increase the collection. So this basically 100 people get together and kind of pool their money to be able to create this amazing library. One of the reasons why he is interested in these libraries is in the past 10 years or so, for him, he'd been introduced to different people's libraries. So people knew he was very interested in reading and learning. And so like the governor of a particular place was like, oh, come on in, check out my library. If you really want, you can borrow a book or something. So different people, influential people, had let him loose in their personal library. And so he thought this was an incredible idea. And isn't it neat that that's kind of where our libraries kind of come from?
So, was it Nathaniel's Nutmeg, the book?
Yes.
Okay. I was looking it up and I'm like, that sounds about right. Okay, good. Now, there was a comment from someone. Let me see if I can find it. It wasn't a question. Hello. First time catching the live.
Oh, welcome.
One complaint about the channel. Mushroom ketchup needs a warning label, highly addictive to cook with.
Yes, it is. So it's like, it goes on everything. Ice cream and whatever else you've got.
You never know when it's going to come in handy. Okay. I'm all caught up.
Okay, we're done. You're caught up there. Okay, so a lot of the books I'm going to talk about here are, some of them are out of print and difficult to get. If they are possibly findable, there is the Amazon link. And some of these are going to be esoteric, very, very narrow focused books, and some are more like general public. This is a good way to grasp onto 18th century things and have fun with it. Whew. So that's the caveat here. Sergeant Lamb's America by Robert Graves. It is basically historical fiction. And a long time ago, we used to sell it. It is a great book for somebody, if you like things like the Aubrey and Maturin series or Hornblower series or something. This is a soldier in the 18th century, but of course researched in amazingly great ways in a fun way to grasp onto 18th century kind of life of a soldier, whatnot, right? Got this great table to stack all these books. Now let me connect that with this one. I talk about this book a lot. Memoirs of a Revolutionary War Soldier by Joseph Plum Martin. And this book, it should be required reading for any high school student. In fact, you could probably even go down into 8th grade or something on that for the reading level. It is relatable. It is, in some places funny. It is not a giant book to read.
And this particular one is kind of expanded upon. So it's the original, but with some
Footnotes in it?
Yeah. Is it?
No, this
Oh,
is
okay.
just the regular. This is the Dover publication. You were probably looking at you had the Private Yankee Doodle
Yes,
one.
that's probably
I
the one
tossed
I'm
that one out because it's not in print. This one is
Oh,
in print.
okay.
So,
Sounds great.
but an excellent read, and it's one that basically it's like, oh, I could read this once a year. Take a couple days, of your reading time, that is, and go through it, because it's like every time you go through it, you find another little kind of vignette. It's really interesting that he writes this later on in life, but he apparently got pretty good. He was good at remembering, what happened in different campaigns and where he was going at the time. And I'm sure I mean, maybe in a wartime you remember things a little bit better because you're going different places. Day-to-day life. It's like,
Maybe
I
he
don't
got
know.
together with his friends and they
Right,
made a
3
little
months
time.
ago on a Tuesday, I don't know what the heck happened, but amazing good book for just a common soldier. He doesn't do, he's never involved in any amazing battles, or nothing incredible happens to him, but you get that feel for what a common soldier's life is like. Ooh, more books in the library. There we go. This is, again, on that first person kind of category of what people are talking about in writing. This is the backcountry, or this is called the Carolina Backcountry on the Eve of the Revolution. It's the journal and other writings of Charles Wood Mason, who was in the backcountry of the Carolinas, and he was an itinerant Anglican preacher. So we hear, sometimes we hear about other kind of traveling preachers. Not normally, Anglican isn't one of them. And so he goes around that backcountry, and again, it's like, what were people thinking then? Especially what were somebody who's coming from England and is having to deal with these rough and ready, kind of scoundrelly backcountry people. So he's a great author for that.
So somebody was dropping in the chat one of their recommendations, which is Johnny Tremain.
Okay.
And so, indeed, if you have a book that you love from the time period, now is the perfect time. to put
Right.
it in
Help
the
us
chat.
all fill
That's
out
right.
our libraries.
Uh-huh.
Johnny Tremain. Ivy, you read Johnny Tremain, didn't you? When you were in school? No?
We did.
You did.
Yeah,
Okay.
I enjoyed
I knew
it.
it was part of somebody's schooling.
Yep.
So to get off of, we got 2 different medical books here, because our library has every category of the 18th century in some way, shape, or form. This is a book on called The Age of Agony, and I believe it's still available. And it is actually part of a series that had to do with 18th century medicine and 19th century and 20th century medicine. This is the 18th century version of it. And giving you that glimpse, not first person, but as a modern book, kind of delving into all the different things that are going on with the medical industry in the 18th century. That's why it's called The Age of Agony. Excellent read, and helps anybody along. A lot of people it's interesting. There are, people interested in writing about the 18th century, maybe even doing their own historical novels. And you kind of need that depth of understanding of what different aspects of life were like. And if you want to know a bit about the medical portion of that, this Age of Agony is an excellent book on that. been in the library. I probably had 3 or 4 different copies of it. Actually, I probably should have. I'm thinking about. I've got this giant stack of books, and it's like, oh wait, there's a. And
there's another. Wait.
And then, yeah. This is a midwife's tale. Based on the diary of Martha Ballard, and Martha Ballard was in the late 18th century, from 1785 to 1812, and she's in Maine. Yeah, in Maine. And she was a midwife. Her husband did different things like survey. He was a lot like Matthew Patten, kind of somebody wore a lot of different hats, was sometimes farmer, sometimes this or that. And this is really neat. The diary itself, if you just read it, and it is available online to just read the diary portions. They're very sparing, and it does take some interpretation to understand and kind of draw the lines together to understand what was being said in the diary, or kind of reading between the lines of the diary. And she does a great job in this book for getting a glimpse of the life on that kind of Maine frontier-y area, what it was like to be a midwife, and how she interacted with the other medical professionals around her and the community, and how all that community has to be all woven together, because it was the only way they could survive. It's not like you needed something and you'd go online and order from Amazon, right? It's nothing like that. So a great book for that. That's the life of a midwife's tale.
Yeah, like the Matthew Patten diary is really helpful to kind of trace the economic back and forth. This too,
in
she's
small community.
She is taking notes about it, and the author expands to kind of help you.
Yeah, she talks
figure
about
out how it's working, because it is not at all how our economy works.
Right, she'll do something for somebody and might not get paid for a year for it, and get paid in interesting and diverse ways. So I was going to look to see if there were any proverbs on books in that, but I didn't get a chance to look at it. A couple of my favorite books, of course, it's not in the list because they're the kind of library books that they have sold for 15 cents a pound probably 20 years ago. Reference books. I've got a whole collection of these guys. They were done in the early 20th century, sometimes as seemingly different sorts of projects in the 1920s and 30s. These are collections of newspaper advertisements. This one is Arts and Crafts Advertisements in New England, 1704 to 1775. And so you get these wonderful, well, you can't really see it there very well, but it's broken up, and you'll have all these newspaper advertisements, and let's see, costume, and then these are people who ran away. Here's somebody, a chair maker, ran away from a chair maker. An Irish man servant, age 20, wore a dark-colored pea jacket lined with white flannel, dark-colored breeches, a felt hat, worsted stockings, and rounded toes. That was an advertisement. Or somebody advertising slate for sale. What else? Window glass for sale. So books like that, again, for those tiny, weird, it's like a book of, newspaper advertisements.
Yes.
Yes.
We're very excited.
Exactly. It's like, woo, here's where the good stuff is. Now, if you want to dig really deep in your library, and these are always, they're never one of those things that, it's like, oh, I'm going to get that for my, light reading at home. This is one volume. I only have a couple of different volumes of Naval Documents of the American Revolution, right? And this book is just 1775. It's not even before the war. It's like before the war starts.
So, Rubzina Warrior Princess was asking if you had any books that were like hollowed out with nutmeg stashes in them, and this would be the perfect choice.
No, because this is just chock
It's
full
a
of
treasure
goodness.
inside.
Unfortunately, this would probably be much more useful if it was in digital form.
To search.
So,
That's true.
because you kind of want to do word searches and search through it, and it's not kind of set up like that. But it's got individual letters or orders for this ship or that ship, all these different, private letters, or sometimes just little extracts of letters, and you can kind of really dig into the minutia of a particular ship happening in 1775, or even in this time they're trying to put together ships. It's like, how can we do anything? Where can we buy a ship? Can we have one built specifically for privateering or for a state navy? Because they have a lot of state navies in the time period. So there's like a Virginia Navy, and there's a Pennsylvania Navy, and there's a New York Navy. So there's a lot of, even though we didn't really get a lot done in the naval realm in the Revolutionary War, well, there's plenty of documents from it. So I think there's at least 6 volumes of that. I forgot the names. You guys didn't remind me. I forgot them.
Sorry.
So this book, it's called A Revolution in Fashion, 1715 through 1815. And this is a book that has the collection of European outfits from the 18th century that's in the collection of the Kyoto Institute of Costuming. And it is a super incredible picture book of the outfits. So not very many of us can get a chance to go and visit the Kyoto Institute or the, what do they call it? The Kyoto Costume Institute. But they did a tremendous job of giving us images of all the beautiful clothing. And most of it is fancy, expensive clothing, but there are a few pieces of normal everyday clothing that show up in a book like that. But this is the kind of thing that if you go digging in our library, you will find.
When I was a kid and we would just hang around the store, while you guys were working, that one is one that I just looked at all the time. It really is just like a picture book. They're just gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not somebody's imagination, but, this guy, feeding Nelson's Navy, I went digging, and these copies are really expensive.
Uh-oh.
It's like an investment sometimes, too. You think, it's like, I buy a $15 book, and then 10 years later, it's $75 because, they just aren't printed anymore. All about the Navy in the early 19th century, the administration, the actual rations, the stoves for it, the how the officers were eating and everything else. It's hard to grasp onto the tiny kind of components of those life aspects. We can guess, and we can, when you get a good book like this that really goes into the minutia, it gives you the true picture of that, instead of just kind of like, well, I'm pretty sure that they did X, Y, Z. Sometimes I just accidentally come upon great books. I did a live stream on this one.
Yep.
I don't know.
It's so appealing.
Year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and this was put together by Schiffer, and it was one of the first books by this particular. It's sort of like this book started a little publishing company, right? And this is somebody collected all the inventories from, so someone dies and they would inventory all the goods in their household and then record those for their estate, basically. And this is from 1684 to 1850, and they go through and they talk about an individual inventories, and then they go ahead and they correlate all that data in different later on in the book, so that you get to see what's happening in individual inventories, and then what happens when you back up and look at all the inventories. They even made it so you could kind of see sort of trends in different furniture or whatnot. So, and good luck finding a copy of this today. That's why it really gets me when libraries get rid of old reference books, because it's like, wow.
There are treasures in there.
Right, you've just thrown the knowledge out. You'll never find a copy of this. So, I mean, we're fortunate that now there's, work on digitizing some of these books.
Mm-hmm.
But
it is lovely. I do like having the physical copy too. Often like with the fruit book from last week,
Yeah.
I found it was online, and I'm like, I'm going to order a copy because I know it has the information I need, but I'll be able to reference it so much more easily in physical format.
Well, and if you have the physical book, you can go in your library and say, I'm just interested in, and you can look through it. But that doesn't work online. You can't just kind of.
Even when you bookmark it, you can't browse it quite the same way.
You can't access it the same way. And so we talked about this book sometime in the past couple of years too. This one is built by hand, and it's, as they say, vernacular building techniques around the world. And it's got some incredible, as somebody who's interested in building technologies of the 18th century and any time really, and the kind of structures that people live in and how they can be built and what their environment is like, this book just goes through all the different parts of the world and shows you all these different kinds of structures. And I think it's, it's kind of sad that we live, how do I get this? It's kind of sad that we are so stuck, say, in the United States with very, very particular construction techniques that are, we've taken the normal person out of the picture of building their own shelter and made it a profession. And we've made the structures so complicated, and everyone's house looks exactly the same, and they're all the same color, and they all use exactly the same technology. And while that is efficient in some ways, it's boring in another.
I feel like, for context for people who don't know, the fact that you built your own straw bale house is important.
Okay, yeah. So I live in a straw bale house that I built. Yes. Yeah, whatever.
I just thought it might be helpful.
Right. So no, our house is not like anyone's house anywhere, at least around close to where we live, and that's just me. That's just me.
Like, I wonder if I can do this the hard way. Yes, I can.
Right. It's like, just try to. We do have some kids' books. This.
Oh, that is shiny. There you go.
Yeah. There we go. And of course, it's got these stupid library stickers over it.
Alas.
But anyway, this is called The Ox Cart Man. And sometimes kids' books are helpful for, especially, if you're homeschooling or whatnot. And this is a story about a homestead, a farmer who their family spends their time throughout the year making individual little products. He loads them all up on this cart, and he takes it to a long way to a market, and he sells all the things out of the cart, and then he sells the cart, and then he sells the ox, and then he walks home with his money, and he trains a new ox, and they make more stuff for the next year. And, just imagining a lifestyle like that and the long view that people have to have when living in that kind of a situation. It's helpful.
And it's written and drawn in a very simple but beautiful way that matches the content. So it's a lovely book.
Yep. Back into the deep realm here. Lewis and Clark, Tailor-Made and Trail Worn, a book all about, and this is not a small book, having to do with all the equipment and the clothing that they would have had and did have, what they started off with, how they would have to repair that, how they would have to make new things because all those things wore out and they were on a multi-year mission. So really neat giant book on that topic. What else do we have here? We talk about this book a lot. This is Albion's Seed, about the British folkways in America that start off in the early 17th century and move into the 18th century, how that affects not just those particular places like, say, New England and Virginia, but how that continues to affect us into the world we live in today. And some really, really interesting, there's like he mentions in here someplace, even, so the nickname for people in Indiana is Hoosiers. And it's a joke. It's like, where does that word come from? And the reality is the word actually is linked all the way back into Great Britain in like the 17th century. And even though we pretend like we don't know where it came from today. The book couldn't be more sort of, on the nose for different sorts of, you want to know what weddings were like. How were they different for people in New England than they were for Virginia or for the Appalachian area or the Quakers in Pennsylvania, and it'll tell you the differences for all those things and language and cooking, and it's just such a great way of understanding the cultures and then the blend of cultures that we have today.
And it's full of statistics.
Yeah,
So the number is compared to the number in a different area, which is really very, very helpful. Gives it really nice grounding.
Yeah, and sometimes numbers, you can be misled by numbers.
True.
And specifically, it's very easy to mislead people with numbers. But if you look at them in a bigger sense and kind of back up, it can still give
Paints
you
a really helpful picture.
Yeah.
The ones on the bottom keep getting heavier.
Yep, exactly. Coffee table kind of book about hearth cooking called, this must be, Lauren picked this one out. She must just like the look of it.
It's really...
it is a great book.
It's just beautifully done.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Look, here's a section on ash cakes.
Yes.
Right here. You just open it up to ash cakes and flatbreads and crumpets and... Boy, this is...
You didn't know you had such a wonderful book in the library.
I'll have to look in this book some more. Roasts. It does have a lot of images for particular like artifacts of the time periods. It's like a little brass Dutch oven with a little top on it.
I liked that that's how they kind of illustrated the book. It was really nice.
So a really neat giant book on open hearth cooking and the accoutrements and kind of recipes or recipe ideas. So good book. Good book. Probably hard to find. I think it was published in 2004, so it's a 20-year-old book now. Okay, hold on. If These Pots Could Talk by Ivor. He was a person who was in charge of archaeology and whatnot down at Williamsburg for years and years and years. And he had a special, of course. If you're into archaeology, you're into ceramics, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes,
just
you
part
are.
of the deal, because that's about like what you're finding 50% of the time or more, and because they last for so long. And he started off just sort of collecting the ones that he could afford, so that they ended up being chipped and broken in pieces of things. And after 20 or 30 or 40 years, those actually became a very valuable collection. And this book, though, it talks about all these different ceramics and that you're going to find from. A lot of these are either English or North American, specifically because they're very similar to them. But you get lots of nice giant pictures of just incredibly neat pieces of pottery. It's a big book. It's a big book. But it seems like all the things that he's connected with all have nice big books to them. There is one that I don't have here with it that talks about the artifacts of colonial America, and it's that one.
I was out on the shelf and there were two of them, and I'm like, I am bringing one of these down to my desk. It looks great.
Yeah, that's a good book. That one just has drawings in it, but again, really, really useful for studying the 18th century. Now, of course, I have my special penchant for naval architecture of the 18th century. Here's a nice giant book called 18th Century Shipbuilding, and this is from the 18th century. This guy wrote it in 1737, so it's got it's like translated from the French, I think, and it has the illustrations from the original book and then other illustrations added in, and it is really, really neat for understanding naval architecture of the 18th century, which is kind of different than how they build ships today. I think that was the pile.
No, you've reached the end of your stack. Amazing.
Wow.
I've got a couple questions here. So somebody was wondering if there were any diaries or journals of urban women in the 18th century. And I immediately started thinking, and all the ones I could think of were rural. So
yeah. And I don't have too many first-person women's pieces.
I was wondering if the one where she travels, Madame Knight, whether that one counted. I don't know how urban her, because she's traveling in the countryside, but I think she's from the city.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, she's certainly upper class.
Yes.
Right? But I don't think that would sort of classify in that. So no, I don't know of anything off the top of my head. But maybe someone in the comment section will chime in.
There's a super chat from Vincent Najir. I just received 5,000 useful receipts in all the useful and domestic arts, constituting a complete and universal practical library and operative encyclopedia by Colin Mackenzie, published in 1829.
Whew. Wow. I love titles of books in the 18th century because they decide to lay it all out there. They were going to give you every little bit thing as the title. So
they made sure you knew what the book was about. This is a super chat from Max Hardcool. My favorite part of the Oxcart Man is where it says, "You have died of dysentery." Oh wait, that's something else.
Yeah. Very similar.
Okay, so are there any? Is there a book that describes the woodsman's skills from the time period?
No, not like that, right? So they generally didn't kind of write books in. So, okay, you mean in a modern context? That's probably where you're going. And I don't know about the skills per se. So you would find books on, modern books on the long hunter, or people in that kind of setting. But skill-wise, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
That's right. Sometimes there are who you're like,
Yeah. Problem is, there are a lot of books, and there's a lot of stuff that's newer that I don't even know about.
That's
right?
very true.
You know,
Our library is kind of, we get new ones from time to time, but a lot of them
I
have
get
been-
plenty of new ones, but they tend to be more like what I'm working on for a cooking episode or something like that.
Books on period blacksmiths or gunsmiths or the Western Virginia frontier.
Western Virginia frontier. There's the Seed Time on the Cumberland, and other books like that. Again, it's tough for me to bring them off the top of my head because some of that's like, okay, let me dig in the library for a while, or, look that up.
Somebody was wondering if our books had mentions about the Christmas and Christmas traditions from the time period.
So you're going to get a little bit of that information in Albion Seed to give you the different concepts, because some of those cultures were very anti-Christmas, even anti-religious holiday. So if you're in the Pennsylvania region and you're in Quaker land, they weren't interested in, it's like Christmas, that's the same as any other day, right? No big deal. Whereas it's interesting that they brought in a lot of the German people that kind of settled in that area also, and they were interested in more of bringing in those Christmas traditions. The people in New England with the traditions that were coming in from East Anglia were, again, for a portion, for a while, Christmas was illegal. It's like, no, you can't celebrate that, because they didn't want it to be a commercial kind of a thing. But in Virginia, it wasn't like that. So, yeah, I don't know of a book specifically about that, but you can find certainly information about that in Albion's Seed.
Okay, I think we're all caught up. This is fun. We got to talk about books. I love talking about books.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like, oh, and then there's that one, and then there's this one, and I could only bring in, the giant stack of books. But it's where I go when, when I want information, whether it's a book today that helps me that's printed in the last, 50 years or 150 years, or I spend a lot of my time digging through at least as much as I can in the books of the 18th century or the early 19th century to get a firsthand feel for what they were writing about on that topic. So, sometimes sometimes you have to kind of work backwards and look at a modern book on it and then check out their bibliography. And it's like, okay, let me go look at those original books. Maybe I can find some more interesting information. But whether it's a book that was printed this year or a book that was printed in 1700, they're just amazing, great information for us. And it is in a sense a time machine, in that those are people at that time that are trying to transmit their knowledge forward into the future, so that we can pick it up and understand something. So it doesn't get any better than that. I want to thank everyone for your tremendous support here on the channel. We do have, Ryan's episode with oysters, and we're going to be looking at the history of the sandwich on Sunday. So make sure to check out that cooking episode. We had a lot of fun with that. And thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Ivy. Thank you, Super Chat folks. I didn't get to the Patreon names or Townsends Plus, but again, your support certainly makes these live streams and this channel happen because of your kindness to us. So thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for watching.